welcome to another Buckeye Review News Update.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. M. Mike McNair, publisher of the Buckeye Review, and I'd like to thank our subscribers and listeners and supporters wherever you are. Most of you are local, but fortunately we have subscribers in 200 cities and 26 states, and mainly because they're from Youngstown. We've exported our talent.
That's great.
We're on the heels of a holiday weekend and approaching the holiday. This is our first production since the election, so we're going to talk a little bit about post or election results. Most of them have already been reported. I think the biggest news about the election was that there was an expectation of a red wave, and there was perhaps a red ripple. If that, and it was historically different from what was expected. So I think that's good news for the country. I think a lot of people showed up to vote more than usual, and so the good news is more people are voting. The bad news is there are still people that the more people vote, there's a small number of people who say, I don't want you to vote. So like what they're doing in Georgia, they're going to shrink down the number of days for their runoff election from 60 days to 30 days. So they're having a runoff election December 6th. Remember last year it was January 6th? January 6th was a famous day because it was the same day of the insurrection or the riot on the Capitol. And it was the day that Raphael Warnock was elected or certified to win. So now he's up against Herschel Walker, a very different race. I won't talk a lot about it, but it's a little bit sad. Because Herschel Walker represents everything that we as black folks try not to be. So the fact that he's supported by, the GOP so strongly is a little bit revealing, I guess. I'll just say it that way. It's revealing. And locally, there was a red wave locally.
Yes.
So it wasn't a red wave nationally, but locally in Ohio, in Mahoning County, Don Hanai won 7th District Court of Appeals. He's been a Democrat for generations. And just because the R next to his name, he beat D'Onofrio, and that was a big upset, but it's happening. And there's a recount in the Mahoning County Commissioner's race because the Republican is close. And then the Democrats got wiped out in Trumbull County as well. So Ohio had a red wave. But you will know, whether you pay attention here or other places, that Ohio had 5 redistricting faux pas, if you will. I'll say faux pas, but it was Supreme Court ordered the legislature to draw the lines fairly according to the law, and they refused to do so. And so we had an election with basically illegal drawn maps. We still had some success percentage-wise, but the red wave still happened here in Ohio. So we're here in Ohio. We're the Buckeye Review. It's the Buckeye State. And my special guest today is Jimma McWilson, and he's been here before.
Yep.
Welcome, Jimma.
Thank you.
Mrs. McWilson, you've been working on an education project for a number of years. Right. And the reason that I wanted to have you here today was to give us an update, because the last time we talked, that seems like there's momentum and a sense of urgency about what's going on right now. Correct. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the issue before, at the very beginning, it was localized. It was contextualized always within the state. However, what's happened here in the state in terms of what you just said, the red wave has been coming for a while, based strictly on the initial constitution of the state of Ohio, and based on its history. So if you look at its history, what happened was not a surprise, right? For the time that, and I say this to people who are Democrats for a reason, is that for the time you had the power, you didn't make sure that you used it to its fullest, right? You can make more changes. And because people look at all Democrats and all Republicans as Democrats or Republicans, when within the parties, you have certain things that are detrimental to the good of the people. Right. Because they're right, left, center, and extreme, either extreme right or left, which causes your middle 60
Okay.
to lose. The right 20, the left 20,
Okay.
they just go off, and all of a sudden, the 60%
Mm-hmm.
don't get what they deserve.
Well, we pay attention to national politics. We read the tea leaves. We read their books.
Right? There you go.
But the truth is, we're unapologetically black.
Well, that is. You made the statement that my co-chair out of Toledo, Mrs. William Moore, makes all the time. The problem with that is that not just here in Youngstown, but specifically here in Youngstown, because this is the epicenter of the failure we're talking about, people do not want to talk about what's best for black children.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have to be multicultural, you have to be inclusive, you have to be all those things, as though you can't be all those things and center your focus on what are the needs of the black children, not
Right.
what do you want to give them.
Right.
That's different
Right.
than what their needs are. So we try and focus on their needs, and that's a part of all of the gathering of data, not only locally but statewide. Why we have a statewide task force, why we have a statewide campaign.
But
President,
the statewide campaign really is about what the local is about as well. It's about equal education for all children.
based on a Supreme Court decision in 1954, which is a critical distinction between what most people think that it was simply about desegregation. So they went from desegregation, which is what it was about, to talking about integration, which is not what it was about. There's a difference between desegregation and integration, right? So the law says you can no longer follow Plessy, which was about segregation, and it was about equality. Now they did.
Real quickly, I know you're kind of going
Right.
fast. 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas.
Exactly.
That was the law that basically undid
Plessy.
the 1897 Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court
Exactly.
decision that rules separate but equal.
Equal.
So now you have to have separate bathrooms, separate railroads, separate baseball teams, and that was the law of the land.
Absolutely.
So we could not legally commingle.
Exactly.
Couldn't even live together.
Yeah.
Right?
You
Couldn't
could-
go to school together.
Yeah.
So in 1954, that all changed. Well,
It-
on the paper.
On paper, it changed.
Right.
And what I remind people of what's going on now also went on then, because the manifesto against that decision was horrible. I mean, they shut down school systems so
Right.
that black kids couldn't even go to school, and we did not act on that the way they were acting on theirs for their children.
Right.
Which was
that's when-
your opportunity to say, okay, we're going to do ours, and we're going to do it our way, while they litigate the rest of it.
Right.
Some kids just didn't get any schooling, so that was a big problem.
So we were segregated, then we became resegregated.
Exactly.
Under
And-
different laws. Let's
different-
have parochial schools, let's have Christian schools, let's have charter schools, let's have whatever, in order to make sure.
Right.
I remember watching a movie. What was the movie about the lady Johnson, the Johnson NASA mathematician, Katherine Johnson,
Yeah.
and she went in the movie,
Right.
to apply to go to get her master's in education or in engineering, and the judge said, we're down south. We don't care about
we don't care
care about that decision. So she very wisely,
Yes.
just asked,
Made her case.
asked to be included and was included.
Yeah.
But the point was, the judge,
Yes.
the people
Yes.
in power said, just because the Supreme Court said this, we're not going to
Exactly.
go along with it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of paperwork on that, documentation on the manifesto, which was signed by 100 and some Congress people, plus the governors, plus the commissioners in those places. So that's kind of what's going on now. All right, it's the same kind of thing that's going on now in a different time. For instance, people talk about the coup, and I always say, well, you just need to go back. I believe it was North Carolina, South Carolina, in 1898, there was a full-blooded coup. I mean, just all out, kill them. It was the fusion party,
Right.
where blacks and white came together, and
Got multiple elected officials, and
across the board.
white folks got mad,
and got their guns,
and
and they're still getting their guns. Right?
they're still getting their guns.
So I think that's important. But going back to your point of the 54 decision, no one has ever challenged the state of Ohio on Brown v. Board of Education until we went to the NAACP and said, this needs to be done at the state level as step one. Here's the documentation that it is the law. We asked the chief legal counsel at National at that point to opine on whether or not Brown v. Board of Education was still the law of the land. And they were hesitant at first because they were wanting to know what we wanted to do. And we just wanted to know, is it the law of the land?
Right.
And can you put it, and they said yes. And we said, well, can you put it in writing? So
reinforcing the law, that's the law.
Yeah.
Say it's the law.
This is how bad it is.
Let me stop you real quick, because hopefully we'll be able to put a graphic up with some of the actual language from the decision.
And that last line, because the last two lines are the most crucial, but the reason why I use that so much in all my trainings is because it speaks to a set of words. Words are powerful. It begins with today, which means the 30th of November, 2022 is today, right? And then it goes across and explains that.
So let me read it real quick.
Okay, no problem.
And I think we'll be able to put it up on the screen either way. Today, education is perhaps the most important function of state and local governments. Compulsory school attendance, laws, and the great expenditures for education for both demonstrate our recognition of the importance of education in our democratic society. It is required in the performance of our most basic public responsibilities, even service in the armed forces. It is the very foundation of good citizenship. Today, again, it is a principal instrument in awakening the child to cultural values, in preparing him for later professional training, and in helping him to adjust normally to his environment. In these days, is 1954 or is it 2022?
Both.
It is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he is denied the opportunity of an education.
The next part is the killer.
Right. So such an opportunity where the state has undertaken to provide it, it is a right which must be made available on equal terms.
Yes. That's the baseline.
Right. So we talk about equality. We expect equality under the law to be treated fairly. Now, we understand that sometimes it doesn't happen. We get stopped more often. Our health is vitiated. Our, wealth is sometimes as well. But education for children, the most vulnerable, with the expectation for the future. That's why this project being undertaken by the NAACP locally and statewide,
and now nationally,
and now nationally, but it's referring
to that point,
to a federal decision, which is the law of the land.
Law of the land, and following that, of course, is the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VI, which, if you look under the Justice Department website, it says specifically, and you cannot discriminate on the basis of race. That comes out of the Justice Department, so that's Title VI. Then if you take Title I is a bill passed by Congress to help those who are disadvantaged achieve the next level of those who have money, right? And so Youngstown is a Title I city school district. Toledo, Dayton, I mean, you can just go up and down the state, Columbus. Well, with that came money. And then for the people who say, well, they're poor and, we don't know what to do with them, Title II monies that the districts get is specifically to train the people who need to know how to teach the kids that they say they don't know how to teach.
Right. So there's been a number of lawsuits that have already been filed
Absolutely.
to say, because we're not talking about, you're not treating me fairly. We're saying that you are spending our tax money
Yep.
to do what you're supposed to do, and you're not doing it.
Right.
Right. So that's really the issue, because I want to not go down this road where people start saying, well, well they're poor, or well they're single parent households, or well they're there's people in the state senate that say, well, they don't know how to clean up behind themselves, and they're underemployed, and they're lazy. All of these tropes and stereotypes that are excuses. Now, these are excuses, but the public sometimes absorbs these excuses.
Have absorbed it.
The good point. Has absorbed these excuses. Right. And what the NAACP is doing,
right,
calling attention to,
right,
is notwithstanding the stereotypes that may have been absorbed.
Exactly.
Because they've been debunked.
Well, there are some we had to, part of the research was to look at all 609 school districts in the state of Ohio, just regular public schools. Mm-hmm. Within that, control for black students in all of those schools. Forget everything else. What were black kids doing in these 609 school districts? Mm-hmm. So in terms of the 609 school districts, there are approximately 240 or 50 where there are a significant number of black students. Mm-hmm. In other words, not 15 or 20, that they are being tested. Mm-hmm. And so controlling for that, you get about 245 or 50 school districts. Out of the 88 counties in the state of Ohio, 87% of all black students are in 10 counties.
Okay.
So you have a better target. You have a cluster, if you will.
Right, right.
Which, of course, you can run a campaign more effectively if you know where you need to put your money.
Right, right.
So within that number of schools, we separated those in control for those who are scoring at the ABC level, so we can set a standard. Everything we expect 75% of our children to achieve on a state exam at proficient or above, at the local level at 2.0 and above. That's a C. C's get degrees according to President Bush. Mm-hmm. And so you go through that process. So now we're down to how many school districts are actually at the DF level. That's where you flip where you put the money. Mm-hmm. You put the most attention and money on the ones who are DF.
Who need it the most.
Right. And but you don't lose sight of the ones that are ABC, because anything could cause them to drop. Mm. But you always control for black. So when we put the numbers out, those are the numbers that President Roberts is looking at with the NAACP task force in the state. That's what we're presenting to national. The National Director of Education and Innovation, Dr. Ivory Tolson, who worked for President Obama as the Director for Excellence in Education, is now the Director. The Chief Legal Counsel and her deputy and assistant chief, we've all met with all of them. Mm-hmm. So now it's at local, state, and national level. We've asked national to intervene at the U.S. Department of Education based on the fact that Ohio put in for an amendment to its Every Student Succeed plan, and within that plan, its academic expectations for black students is 54.8 on a 0 to 120 scale, and for white students it's 84.3. So you're looking at
a 30-point difference.
So are we looking at unequal terms? Well, their explanation is very simple, and so we've got this on tape. So that's what we played. Mrs. Moore asked to play that. Right. And if you could look at the guy who was trying to explain academically and from a data standpoint, he kept saying to President Roberts, well, have some data that you need to look at. So it's not the data. There's nothing wrong with the data. Mm-hmm. Why are you starting black kids at 54.8? Why is that where you expect them? And why are you expecting white kids to be at 84.3? I mean, for me, and the way I present it to National, is this academic segregation in integrated schools.
Ooh.
And that's what they're doing.
And those numbers are
Verification.
quantitative, so
Yes.
they can't say, I mean, they can say, well, it's a target, it's closing the achievement gap, it's how much we expect, it's expectations, it's whatever they say, it's lower.
That's
it's different.
That's why my answer to that was, well, if you take 1954 until the time we did our first analysis, the state of Ohio would have had 13 5-year plans and or 6 10-year plans, and our kids are still going backwards. Mm-hmm. So this new plan you have is the same thing that you wrote before. Mm-hmm. You're just using different language with different people.
Right.
We don't want to talk about improvement. We want to talk about corrective action.
And
that's all. That's a revolutionary ball game.
Right.
Right? Because you're going to improve to correct. But if you're always talking about correcting, and I said to them, if in fact black children were at 0 in 1954 in the state of Ohio, and they only improve 1 point per year, they would already be 14 points higher than where you were projecting them.
Right. So I saw a number in a presentation the other day that said like some 72% of third graders are not at grade level, not reading at professional level, something like that. Was that right?
Yeah, what they do is in the districts, for instance, locally, any local district, this applies. For instance, in Toledo, they use iReady. In Youngstown, they use NWA. So if we look at those two places, the first thing is, what is it that they're doing locally, right, to prepare the kids to take the state exam, right? And they're supposed to look at growth. So the revolution that was here in town that was very quiet is the local task force that we put together looks at Youngstown City Schools NWA scores every quarter. So we can predict the second quarter, what's going to look like the third quarter at the end of the year. We were able to do that last year, and they landed up within 2 points of where we said they would be. So over 70% of the kids were below average in reading, and 80-some% were below level in math.
And if you can predict it, you should be able to prevent it.
There you go. Exactly.
But, and then it's sad to think about 68 years at 1% a year and still not going anywhere. But basically, what the NACP is saying, we want to put a demand on the state to raise achievement for black children.
Right, because right now it is discriminatory.
Let me say it again. Demand. We're going to put a demand on the state to raise the achievement for black children.
Right. Now, the comeback from the state is this. Mr. McNair, we are a locally controlled district. And so my point, when we met with them on that issue, with their general counsel, the superintendent, their policy director, their director of accountability and assessment, was that why is it that each district could not just say to you, the state, we are not going to give this exam. Period. We're going to do our own thing. We're local control. We're not taking the state exam. Can they do that?
No.
They
can't do it. And also because they get federal money, right?
That's right.
And this federal money comes to the state, and the state sends it to the 600
and that's right.
609, is it?
So if they're 609s are the ones that are traditional.
Okay.
And we didn't do charters in private schools.
Okay.
We were focused on what they say is the problem, public education. Then let's look at it. And what we did was look at public education from the year it started and from 3 years before it started. Who was the person that was actually pushing for public education based on property taxes was a fellow by the name of Caleb Atwater in 1823-24. Finally, in 1825, public education based on property taxes, a big discussion back then, big debate back then, finally started.
Okay.
They just left black kids out. They didn't discriminate. They just kept them out of the schools.
Okay.
Okay. They didn't get a free education. Black children started getting a free education in 1831. A Quaker family put together a school that black kids and other kids could go because they were out of the public school. So you have a 6-year gap there that they don't want to talk about.
Didn't exist.
Didn't exist.
Okay.
So now we remind them.
You mean we do history in Ohio?
Well, my whole purpose in terms of running the campaign part was to get the research done.
Well, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that's real important. But I wasn't kidding when I say we do history in Ohio, because there was also a state, resolution to, change the law about teaching history.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that President Roberts and I had a conversation on this, and he was being advised by some academics. And the problem with the academics on CRT is you're defending a theory. It's a theory. And the question is, what are the facts? So I go back to 1803, the first Constitution, in Article 4, Section 1. Only white males could vote and command power. It says that. There's a single line that says that. In the Constitution that was re-ratified in 1851, in Article 5, Section 1, it reaffirms Article 4, Section 1. In 1874, at the Third Constitutional Convention, they ratified what was in 1851 and didn't change it.
Right.
In 1912, the language is still there in 18. They did not remove white male supremacy from the state constitution until 1923 with an amendment, because women, they're women to begin with, got the right to vote, and they were demanding to run for office.
Right.
So it was 120 years of white male supremacy. So you don't have to speak about critical race theory. You should talk about critical race facts.
Or just talk about
Their constitution.
history. Just talk about history.
Yeah, this is your constitution.
Right. But I think it's important and also difficult, right? Because and we didn't finish the discussion about the research that actually that concluded that black children are not deficient because of poverty.
Yeah.
Right. Poverty is
Well,
not
that was the other
issue.
part. Yeah, poverty was the other part of the research. So what we did was we chose schools deliberately.
Same
that were
level
100
of poverty.
They were 100% poverty.
Right.
We brought them actually to Youngstown State University and to Eastern Gateway, videotaped it, created a playlist, and that playlist, they're our expert speakers. What they did was they went through and disaggregated their report cards, how much money they got. All the kids were scoring at A, B, C level.
So the same level of poverty, but because they were in East
Timbuktu,
Liverpool or Steubenville, whatever.
Akron, Steubenville, Youngstown.
They were still scoring much higher. Yeah. So it wasn't a poverty issue.
No.
Okay.
Well, they stopped that one, then they went to trauma.
Okay.
And our answer to that was, well, I don't know any black person that's in the United States that hasn't suffered trauma. It is just what it is.
Right.
The nature of how we got to be, not Asantewaa, not Imhotep, is Mike McNair. It's how did we get these names? How did we get
traumatized? Stole our names.
Well, they had you first have to brainwash people. You brainwash people through torture, and then you go from brainwashing, you go to enculturated menticide, which is a very smooth way of getting you to maintain that who you are not.
It's psychological violence.
Yeah. And it's the same thing in terms of the district. So when you look at the districts and they say, well, we've done this, we have an AF process, academic and finance. So you look at the finance first, so you know what monies they have. Then you compare and contrast. So what they're guilty of in legal terminology is nonfeasance. And in nonfeasance, as a legal term, it simply means you didn't do something that you should have done
With this money.
with this money. It wasn't malfeasance and it wasn't misfeasance.
Okay.
And so nonfeasance kind of puts you in the middle.
I'm feeling like the Brett Favre thing in
Yes.
Mississippi, when they took that money that was for those
Poor
poor
people.
people, and they did something that was not designed for
You mean put a 1.7 million into a
a
football
stadium in a private school.
and you have 70% of your kids not reading at grade level.
Right, right.
I mean,
So that was, well, that's malfeasance, huh?
no, it's
That's
still
nonfeasance. Well, they didn't,
it's still
nonfeasance
nonfeasance.
because they didn't use it.
Yeah,
They didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Yeah,
But doing it, that's also malfeasance.
So you can't. It is very difficult in the United States to sue and win for malfeasance in education.
Okay.
It's just difficult
Right.
because educationalese is based pretty much on linguistics, and my word, I can say the same word you say, and I mean something different. I can say "and" to you right now, and you need to ask me, are you talking about A-N-D or A-N-N?
Or AN. Okay.
There. I mean, it's just it's language is very important. So we hone in on the words, we drill down on what do you mean by this. So we're writing down what you mean. what
So
you
talk
say.
about the lawsuits. There's a couple of lawsuits that have already been filed and won based on nonfeasance.
Yeah, well,
Or
we
Title
we
I,
won't
or-
know legally because what we're trying to do is stay in our lane. Our lane is to get the research done, get the advocacy done, lay out the lay of the land, put it to the National Chief Legal Counsel, which is where it is right now, because of what's going on at the U.S. Department of Education. So national needs to, at the federal level, intervene at the U.S. Department of Education level.
Right, right.
And that's what we're in a hard, full court press on
Because
right
that's
now.
happening right now. So
It's
I
all
guess
real time.
I want to paint the picture because basically we're saying, or you're saying, the state of Ohio
Yes,
has said to the federal government,
yes.
we want to continue to spend this money with different standards for different kids.
Well, they won't say standards.
They won't say it.
Yeah,
but
the way you use standards and the way I would use standards is not the way they use standards. What they'll tell you is on their website, their standards, which is what they lay down to send to districts that they can access, is different than their expectation. They will speak to benchmarks, targets, and goals. So when we write a sentence, we say benchmarks, targets, and or goals.
they'll say expectations. They'll say they'll change the language, and I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
But the bottom line
Bottom
is
line
the
is-
Ohio is saying to the federal government,
Yes.
we want to continue to get this money, but we're going to distribute it and use it unequally. Perhaps
Exactly.
that's what
Yeah.
that's why we brought up
Because
the
they're-
language of Brown.
Because we're saying that you're not meeting the bottom line of that paragraph.
Right, we're not
If
doing-
you decide to provide this opportunity, you should do so on equal terms. Now they can say, however, Ms. McNair, if you look at our per pupil spending, the per pupil spending is the same. I mean, we don't do that. The question you have to ask yourself is how is it that Steubenville as a school district can score on the new scoring system 5 stars and black kids are achieving above the level that you expect the white kids? How does that happen in a 100% poverty school district? How does it, hey, tell me, I don't know.
And so with all of the language and all of the levels of expertise,
Right.
the bottom line is for us as the community,
Yes.
right? Because we want our children to,
Yes.
to succeed, and we feel like we're sending them, and this is not just Youngstown. This is all of the black children
Yeah.
in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, we're dealing
I mean,
right-
if they're
yeah.
in a district that has a critical mass of black kids.
Right, and in some districts, for instance, one district we found by accident, we were using IRN numbers. So randomly take at a school's IRN, don't look at the district, just randomly pull a number and then look at the report card. And one of the ones that I found was Locklear. And that particular district is like 48% African American students, and they have now taken over the bottom. Youngstown, for the longest, has been at 609 out of 609, and now they are. And their score is lower than Youngstown. And Youngstown got a 50.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, when we look at the numbers, where we can predict that there's still going to be the majority of the children, the black children, that are not doing well
by design, and that's what we have to challenge.
Yeah. So when you say it's by design, now you're making an indictment on the leadership.
Only based on the law.
Well, sure. No, I understand.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying one of the things we're doing, the reason why we do these trainings every night, we just did Cincinnati, we just did Toledo, we just did Dayton, Lima, not Lima, Zanesville, Lima's coming up, Columbus we're trying to get aboard because one of the reasons they're state capital. But the detail of what they need to know is critical. It's not in the report card from the state. Everyone thinks that the report card from the state is the most important tool. However, it is not. For instance, if you got rid of the state test tomorrow, then you would have a true look at what the local district is doing to prepare the kids for a career in college. Because now it's on them. It's on their curriculum. It's on their professional development. It's on their instructions. But everyone gets lost in, well, the state says we didn't do this and that. The reason the state says this is because you didn't produce what you should have produced in the first place.
So it's a ping pong match, but or it's an elephant contest and we're the grass.
That's right. The kids are the grass, and we're trying to get them out of the way.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, the urgency of the matter is Ohio's basically saying, hey, we want to still do this, even though it's unequal. We don't pay attention to the fact, don't look behind the curtain or behind these numbers at the fact that there's no achievement for black children. Look at all of the work we've done.
Yes.
Look at all the money we've spent and all the efforts that we've made. But what we're saying, or what the NACP is saying, and the community is saying as well, parents are saying,
because that has to come up.
We're saying, look, we don't like these different standards. We don't like difference. We have a resolution from our mayor, a resolution from city councils. We don't like different standards. That doesn't make mathematical sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. Right? And one of the things that the final part of what we're preparing for President Roberts at the state level at this point, and then for national, is to look at the complete database, which if you put a spreadsheet up there, it would be as wide as that bookshelf. Okay.
I can
Go
imagine.
A through Z, and then A through AA, B, B, C, D. So you would go. But if you look at just controlling for that particular level of proficiency, or the kids achieving the level of proficiency, which they say that is their goal, except they haven't defined the expectation for the level of proficiency as an independent benchmark, like they did from 2013 to 2017. It was very clear where the goal line was. And so we pulled their report cards from 1998 up to 2017. And so it's never been this way. This is brand new, and this is only under the Every Student Succeed Act, which was what President Obama presented. And when we were briefed by Senator Murray and Congressman Scott, who negotiated this deal for him, they said, this is a civil rights issue. You're going to have to fight because we had to give up more power to the states. So the battle is on.
And so I just want to, maybe end on this point, because the states have a tendency, as we talked about with, was it Alabama, and the engineering thing after Brown? The states have a tendency to use their power to say, I don't want to do what the federal government, you can't tell me what to do.
That's right.
Right?
Natural tension.
Right. And so, and we see it
Today.
right now. I mean, it's like reading the newspaper, you know.
Yeah. It's right here, right now.
Fannie Willis in Fulton County, Georgia, is saying, "Look, you guys are doing a federal election and messing with us here, and you're on trial here in Georgia, and there's going to be indictments."
The nice thing about today, though, is, and I caution people a time to talk about how bad it is. I said, you need to always compare it to how bad it was. Right?
Okay.
So in other words, for me, what I normally say to people, that because I don't argue the point, my thing is, when you go home tonight, here's what you'd like to do. You'd like to take George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, and former President Trump. Which one would you take as your president? I mean, it's a simple question.
So they're all the same. Well, I guess you have to take President Trump because he didn't have slaves, right? But he's trying to go back.
I understand, but it's to bring clarity to them that there has been some advancement.
Oh, clearly.
That lots. Well, some people want to say, well, things are horrible and they haven't gotten any better.
Sure.
Well, you have to clear their head, because if you have tools now that you can use that you didn't have, then,
Right.
and that's the important thing about, let's use the tools we have. Let's use them effectively. And as people say, for me, being a vet coming out of Vietnam, you need to weaponize the words. This is intellectual warfare, and you need to take that intellectual warfare to the max. Whatever battle you're in, the war is out here, but your battle, like ours was first here in Youngstown,
Right.
the second was at the state, and then national is looking at the global picture, because what happens in Youngstown and what they do is going to affect what they do in other states.
Right, right.
And currently, the National Board of Directors Education Chair, who happens to be the president of the conference in Florida, Dr. Nweezy, we've had 3 conversations with her in relationship to what we're doing as a template for what they can do. So she wants to be first on the list. And then we had a meeting with she and the National Executive Director of Education. So they're all on the same page. And what we're doing now, and this will all be posted this month.
Okay.
It's already on the local NAACP website, because that's where it started.
All right.
The top 10 schools with 100% poverty who are achieving at the ABC level is now being transferred to the state website. And what we're asking national to do besides that is that every single state should have the top 10 schools controlled
Okay.
for black, so we can get 500 to 1,000, and you start changing the mindset of
Right,
people
right.
saying it can't be done, because right now you have no proof, right? Oh, you can say, well, we know we can do it. Well, how about talking about the ones who are doing it?
Right, right. So that research was very important.
Yes.
And also the quantitative standards, what do you call it, the achievement gap, expectations.
All of the above.
All of the words that are used to say we're going to treat you differently,
Yes.
or we're going to treat you the same. And that's why asking the question, are we on the foundation of the Supreme Court decision from 1954? Are we going to stay there?
Right.
And it still strikes a little bit of fear to think in terms of all over the country they're saying, oh, don't teach history, and critical race theory is bad, and they're going to say you're woke, and even the resolutions that say that, you know, racism is a problem in education and in health. Even in Ohio, our governor basically forced the hand of the Department of Education, or the boards, to rescind that resolution and redistrict so they can get people out that
Absolutely.
don't think clearly and
Yeah.
that are okay with washing away
That's
or
exactly what
whitewashing history.
As,
So
as a matter of fact, the president of the board initially told us that the reason she supported the numbers that were put out at first was because our kids were so far behind, and they did have high expectations. Now, they are correct in this sense. There is a state report card that the board sees. There's a local report card that the local district sees. So what we prepared for President Roberts and other presidents is that you need to look at the state report card, because it is all of the kids in the entire state, in all 609 school districts, and where they are. So if you look at the previous 3 years, black students were at 33, 37, and 39. And so when they said, okay, we want them to be up here at 63.4, well, that was a stretch for them. Because in actuality, only 39% made it. So there was no corrective action put in, but they thought add in 20 points. Well,
That's a big deal.
That was
Oh my, we had 20 points.
yeah, and they could honestly say we do have high expectations. That's why we put it way up here at,
To
at
63,
54,
to 50, okay.
63.
Even though you put others higher. Okay.
Yeah. So that's why the black-white decision. So we're being very specific. The Supreme Court decision was a black-white decision. So there's no comparison. But everyone else, their expectations are higher than black students. So you have black kids in a caste system.
So what should we do? I mean, I know the NACP, fortunately, because of the work done here in Ohio, starting in Youngstown,
Right.
the research,
Right.
the empirical data, the controlling for poverty, for race, for economics, you still have been able to say these are best practices.
Right.
And we know by comparison
Right.
that many are not using best practices.
Right.
So
and
the goal is to get
therein
those-
lies the battle, right? Because
Wait.
the tension
said-
between
Right, I'm
the
sorry. go ahead.
tension between I'm telling the world that Ohio is a local situation on the one hand, and I'm commanding them on the right hand. So there's a hybrid, right? There are certain things local can do on their own if it's approved by the state. Right?
And approved by the Fed.
There you go. And then there are certain things that the state dictates.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So we all have to know that, because a lot of people are locked into what the state does. Right? And once they're locked in, the state report card is the only thing there is. And
Right,
that's
right.
just not true.
And it changed. I mean, I've seen this report card change. I mean, like
There's a change in the change that they just changed. Okay, it's written in. There's a paragraph in there that says each year we will change the expectations, benchmarks, based on the highest 2%.
okay.
So it's built in.
All right, you're going to really confuse everybody. So I think for the purposes of this discussion, the urgency that Ohio has asked
Right.
the federal
Government.
Department of Education,
Right. To
Department of
approve
Education,
these
to
inferior
approve and-
expectations,
Right.
benchmarks, targets, goals.
And so, while in Ohio, it's already been said at the highest level
Yes.
that they are okay with these substandards for
Right.
for black children.
Right.
While we don't like that,
Right.
I hate that. I can't believe that that's happening.
Yeah.
And yet, they've already agreed, conspired,
All of
clapped
the
their
above.
hands and said, "Hey, let us do this
Right.
in Ohio with everybody's money." So, what do we do now? Do we wait? Do we make
No.
some phone
Oh,
calls? Do
you,
we?
you do all of the above, and you do it simultaneously.
Okay.
I think Colin Powell said it best. You surround it, you cut it off, and you try and kill it. That's the ball game. I mean, that means all hands on deck. And you only have to say one thing. Either you approve of this academic
Disparity.
segregation. No, this is academic segregation.
Let's just disparity.
Putting our kids in an academic caste system at
Okay.
the bottom, because
Okay.
that's what the numbers tell you.
Okay.
They're not what I say. Just look
Sure,
at their
sure.
numbers on their report card. So, and it's planned in 10 years they will still be in the same position.
So can people go to the state website and see that?
The people can go to,
Or should
the first
NACP?
thing they should do is go to, just Google the Task Force on Best Academic Practice, Best Academic Practice for Black Students. Google Task Force on Best Academic Practice for Black Students. You will find the back history, you will find the timeline for the back history. You will find when public education started. You will know all the members of the state task force. There are recordings that you can listen to the conversation, and especially listen to June 1st when President Roberts challenged all of them on the unacceptability of these inferior scores. And I think all of it is worthy, but if you go to May 21st of last year, you will see all of the documentation on the demographics.
Right.
That's where the 88 counties and 87% of the black kids are in 10 counties. Those things are very important. So first, just understand what's going on and state to yourself, we believe in that statement where the state decides to provide the opportunity of education, it must do so on equal terms.
Right, right.
And there's going to be a new set of surveys that are going to go out. Everybody needs to sign. It needs to be all hands on deck. But that's going to come back to the media, to especially the collective black media, to lead that charge. Because that's how it's been done before on the 63.4. That's how Youngstown City Council will be taking it back to them on this new lower 54.8. And people can just decide that in mass. That's going to be taking place all over the state.
Right. So you can, people may have seen stories that we've done in the past. There's one in this current edition of the Buckeye Review by Dr. Homer Warren talking about we're not consumers, and or Targeted for Failure, where the failure is at a leadership level. It's at a very high level.
Very high level.
I mean, parents are raising their kids, doing the best they can, going to work, sending them to school with the expectation
that school's going to do the right thing. And I'd like to end my note with this. We did a lot of focus groups with teachers, parents, students over these years. I mean, we've interacted with over 25,000 family members. 5,000 students are in our Academic Olympian Society. And these are all parents who support all their kids. So when people say the parents are lagging, there are students who are achieving at these levels. So we made sure that we documented the asset model while we were dealing with the deficit model. So we know it's there.
Because what you were doing is debunking the myth that parents are not involved.
Exactly.
Because of what's going on at home.
Exactly.
This is why the schools.
And some of what we found out that was very simple. If a parent is working 2 jobs, it's difficult for them to be as involved. So the question is, when they get to school, what is it that the school's responsibility is to make sure that they're doing things on equal terms and identify any deficit and a corrective action for the deficit, and then meet with the parent at a time that they don't have to give up the money to pay the rent, to buy the food, to make these things possible. And that's why we did the parent piece. We did the parent piece, so the parents had to come out on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock from 4 to 6.
And they came out in number, didn't they?
They had to pay for their own parking. They had to find parking. They had to walk. There was no food.
They supported their kids.
No food, no entertainment, just academic achievement.
They support their kids.
And so they did. And so we know that works. We have it in pictures. We have it in videos. We have it on YouTube. We have it on websites.
There's no parent that does not love their kids. There's there's dysfunction, but it happens across the board. So it's not like endemic to black folks.
If they're interested, they can, of course, call the Buckeye Review, because you're connected in this now, and it is a media deal. So call the Buckeye Review. You can reach us. You are also in direct contact with all of the other media that's within the collective black media. So we're trying to make it centralized in working with the black media first to get us conscious enough and get a new mindset, as Dr. Warren is talking about in his book, Producer Consciousness, a new mindset in education. That new mindset is you can produce the justice that you want. First, you have to have the courage to engage.
Exactly.
And a lot of people may be lacking a little courage, but I remember a guy describing being in a meeting with Dr. King, and he said he had been afraid all of his life This is down in the South. He says, but just sitting there with Dr. King there, it gave him a little bit of courage.
Okay. Okay.
So that's the whole point of trying to get this out to our
There
people.
you go.
Yeah.
So the more of us that talk about it, we care about our kids,
That's
we know
right.
they can learn, and we're going to hold, and things are better because we
Yeah.
can hold people accountable
Right.
at the ballot box, at the, you
Right.
know, with lawsuits, and
All
with
of the above.
public pressure,
Yes.
because we want our children to
Yeah.
achieve at high levels.
The
And
narrative,
not
the
to-
narrative now is that they are inferior. That's the
Right.
narrative. We have to counter the narrative based on the fact that it does not matter what kind of test is given, black kids can achieve on it.
Sure,
We know
sure,
it.
sure.
The facts are there, and we're not using the weapons we have in order to get it. For instance, right now, it's like Mr. Fox from Central State. He was so inspired, he got a hold of the lady at the Springfield News, and they're
Right.
going to do the interview next week. So
Right,
then all of a sudden it starts to ooze out
right, right.
because they know the data. They know the situation.
Exactly, and it's going to take some time for people to absorb the data because you start disaggregating
Yes.
and it's 609 districts, it's third graders, it's eighth graders, it's expectations, it's standards, it's oh no, it's local control, it's state control, it's
Right.
oh by the way.
And
there's
actually, we're
another-
going to do a graph on local and state control.
But I will. Speaking of graphs, I'm going to at the end of this presentation put up the timeline.
Okay.
Of when Ohio was Ohio to now, because because people have this expectation. Well, things are better, so but they've never been equal, and the fact that there seems to be an effort to turn back the clock is the good news. Is we're not going to allow that to happen to us.
Right.
We're not going to allow it to happen. We're not.
One of the fundamental things that I found in dealing with Ohio is what you see on the national scale.
Mm-hmm.
I do not want to admit that which I did, that you're telling me I did, that I did.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. You can be
Right.
in the meeting, and you're sitting there, and then they'll go somewhere else.
Right, right. But we can read. That's why I would say empirical data.
Yeah.
It's
Their empirical data.
Right,
We don't even use ours. We use
right.
theirs. We make sure we get it via email. We make sure we maintain the email with who it
the
came
copy
from.
is videotaped.
Yeah.
audio.
You have to
So
do the
I
whole
want
nine
I want to thank you, Mr. McWilson,
problem.
for the research, for being the prime mover behind this project. I think our listeners and followers will get information.
Good.
We'll try to continue to keep them informed and point them to other news outlets that are doing similar
Same
conversations to get a little bit more
Great.
data, to be a little bit more empowered with courage
To get it done.
speak forcefully about supporting and encouraging.
And I would say
our kids.
to everyone that watches the program,
Okay.
our parents care, our children care. As a community, we have to provide what they need in order to get what they need, as opposed to what others who are being paid are giving them. That's a different. The need is different than what someone wants to give them.
Right.
And if they give them less, they're going to be at the bottom. And that does not have to be, because there are enough of them already achieving in enough places that we can counter the narrative with the numbers, the addresses, all of that.
Exactly, and
so
it's
that
not so
people know.
much we want these pockets of excellence.
Right.
Oh, look at this one, look at that one. No, we want to look at all of them.
Across the board.
I mean, okay, if a minority slice are doing terrible, that makes sense. But if the majority is doing terrible, that ain't
different.
right.
That's why we're using 75% should be proficient and above, grade level or above, average or above, however, whatever term you want to use.
Right.
That 75% should be there. And if they're not, why not?
How can they reach you? I mean, you can reach the Buckeye Review at 2250. That's area code 330.
Right. You can reach me at 330-402-5127.
And you can go to our website. You can go
right now the OhioNAACP.org is already up, but it's being ramped up even more as we complete this work. Okay. So you can go there. You can call directly Family Empowerment Student Achievement Institute. You can just Google it. Okay. And the background history, pictures, everything's there.
And we'll put a link to OhioBMC.com too.
Okay,
so that basically is a collective
right.
of all the Black-owned media sources in Ohio.
Great.
OhioBMC.com. Well, I have to make sure I get that link up there.
Right.
But
well, one of the last things that we're going to ask the media, the Black media specifically, is to participate with us in January. Okay. On a summit on this very kicking off a campaign.
Okay.
And everyone can be involved.
Okay.
There's no, you don't have to be a specialist in anything except believe in our kids and believe in the fact that they should get exactly what that one paragraph that we're going to concentrate on, that one paragraph says, and where the money to back it up, where it is. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Well, we'll be getting the information out. I want to again thank you for your time. I want to thank our production staff for helping us.
Thank you.
To get this out. It's really important. We can't do it enough. So you'll be seeing it on television. Right. You'll be seeing it on YouTube perhaps, and Facebook and other sources. And of course, pick up the Buckeye Review where you can. And we'll be giving you an update very soon on other local issues. This one is taking priority because it's not what everybody's talking about. As a matter of fact, it's not what anyone's talking about. Right. And that's where the problem is. Right. Well, that's the travesty.
You can't know labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. You can't know any of that unless you have some form of education.
Right.
That's the key.
So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for asking.
So we expect to do another update fairly soon, but I wanted to keep this as a single subject. There is some interesting things in the current edition of the Buckeye Review, but there always is. So you can see it online, pick up the electronic edition, or pick it up at a newsstand near you. God bless you. I'm Dr. M. Mike McNair out. Thanks again to Jimma McWilson.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Peace.